Welcome to the Geek Therapy Radio podcast. I'm your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I decided to video record this podcast this week. You know, I've got the Geek Therapy Radio YouTube channel, which if you're listening to this on the actual radio or you're just listening to the podcast, I highly encourage you to go over to YouTube and type in Geek Therapy Radio and subscribe to the Geek Therapy Radio YouTube channel. My color scheme across everything, whether it's podcasts or the YouTube channel or Twitter, Instagram, social media, Facebook, all that good stuff, TikTok. I forget that I have a TikTok. The color scheme is always red, white, and black, or any combination thereof. So type in Geek Therapy Radio into your favorite podcast player and YouTube, as mentioned, and any social media, and look for the red, white, and black color scheme, and that's how you know you have this brand of Geek Therapy Radio. But like I mentioned, I am recording this for YouTube right now. I want to put more content on my channel. As most of you know, I work for the Houston Museum of Natural Science. I am the YouTube channel manager for the Houston Museum of Natural Science, so that's my work. That's what my days are filled with, managing the YouTube channel, creating content, producing content for the museum, and I'm very thankful to do that. But if you've noticed, if you've been a long-time listener, you've noticed that I've not been putting a whole lot of content on my Geek Therapy Radio YouTube channel. So I want to change that, and I want to start more regularly, at least recording these podcasts. So one more time, if you're listening on the radio or you're listening to the podcast, check out Geek Therapy Radio on YouTube and make sure you get subscribed there. I just want to say I appreciate even your consideration of subscribing. If you're watching this video right now on YouTube, I just appreciate you spending time with me and even considering subscribing. There's so much content out there. Whether you're subscribing to the podcast or YouTube channel, I just appreciate even it crossing your mind to do so. Let's get into some actual content here. So last week, I talked quite a bit about my VR conundrum, my virtual reality setup. And the conundrum isn't that it doesn't work necessarily. Actually, one of the conundrums was that it doesn't work with my Asus Zephyrus G14 laptop here. This is what I'm using to record the podcast, record the radio show, record this YouTube video. The G14 has built-in Radeon graphics because it's an AMD APU inside there, the 5900HS, and it also has discrete graphics from NVIDIA. So it's got an AMD graphics from Radeon, and it's got NVIDIA graphics in the form of the RTX 3060. And where that's kind of a rub and an issue is when you get into VR. When you plug in my Oculus Rift, it's the first generation Oculus Rift, it doesn't communicate well either through the USB port or through the HDMI port. It's like, do I want Radeon? Do I want NVIDIA? And that kind of hang up in communication means that I can't use an Oculus Rift with my Asus Zephyrus G14. In all of my research, I have not seen anybody who's been successful using an OG original. Well, not the original public release of the Oculus Rift. I've not seen any success with anybody using it with an Asus Zephyrus G14. So, as I mentioned in the last episode, I want to change that. I want to be able to use the virtual reality, the VR capability of this laptop, and that means that I'm not stuck with, but I'm going to go with the Oculus Quest 2. And that's where I'm going with this segment here. This idea here is a part of me, and I've discussed this with a friend. It's kind of like, we're waiting for Oculus or for Facebook's announcement event coming up in October of the roadmap for any future Oculus releases. So are we going to see a Quest 2 Pro? Are we going to see a Quest 3? Mark Zuckerberg has said that they already have plans for the Quest 3 and 4. They're already a few generations ahead. That's how tech companies have to operate. They can't just think about the next product. They have to be thinking about the next 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 products. That's the same way Apple does. That's the same any big tech company does. The rub is, while yes, I want to wait for the October announcement of any potential new Oculus headset, the reality is that even if they announce the Oculus 2 Pro or the Oculus 3, that we're not going to get it anytime soon before next year. It's going to be 2022 by the time we get any new headset, if we get a new headset next year. It could be possible, given chip shortages and everything going on in that arena, that Oculus Quest 2 might just be what is offered for the next foreseeable future. The Oculus Quest 2, as of recording right now, is less than a year old. So it would make sense for it to be a prolonged product, to get more support going down the line, and us not see the release of the Quest 2 Pro or a Quest 3 anytime soon, at least until 2022. And that's the conundrum I have, is I really want a Quest 2, an Oculus Quest 2, because I want to hook it up to my laptop, and I want to get the improved VR experience going with the Quest 2, the improved visuals over the original Oculus Rift that I have. I love the Oculus Rift. I use it semi-regularly. I've played Lone Echo and Half-Life Alyx and all those games, but the Quest 2 is just so much more portable, and the idea of basically loading it up, side-loading emulators into there, like Dolphin, to play GameCube games, and be laying there in bed playing Mario Golf on a virtual IMAX screen. It's just, that's what I want. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. If you're watching this on YouTube and you're wondering about the breaks and how I'm timing things out, it's because this is also going to broadcast radio. So, just a little peek behind the curtain here. In that break, in that bump, it cuts out at a very certain time that I have preset, so that the radio station can play 3, 4, 5 minutes, God forbid, of commercials in between the segments. If you're just listening to the podcast, it's just kind of a seamless bump. If you're watching this on YouTube, it's a seamless bump. But I do have to time out the segments. They are very specific for radio. The segments, it's 4 segments, so it's an 8-minute segment, 10-minute segment, 11-minute segment, and then another 10-minute segment, equaling 39 minutes of total content for the radio. It used to be a little bit more freeform than that. I could kind of push the content up to like 50 minutes, I think, when I first started the show. My bosses are like, don't go anything more than 55 minutes. That is when my show was airing at midnight. When I first started the show, it was airing midnight Sunday, so I called it Saturday nights. But technically, at the stroke of midnight, it was Sunday, so it was airing very late at night on the weekend, and they're like, we don't have a ton of spots in there anyways. Run along with your segments, and I was more than happy to do so because I had a lot to say, a lot to geek out about. We're all geeks about something, so I talked about a lot of things, from cars to electronics to vintage computers to video games, music, everything. There's so much under the sun that we're geek about, and there was just a lot of content, a lot of things I could say about that. So when I first started, it was at midnight, not many commercials, and I was free to go along. But now I'm bound to 39 minutes of total content across 4 segments, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 11 minutes, 10 minutes. So now you know if you're watching YouTube. In this segment, I kind of wanted to talk about what I did today, and as of recording this, it's a video that I have in the hopper, because like I mentioned before, I'm trying to put out more videos on my Geek Therapy Radio YouTube channel, but since my day job is managing the YouTube channel for the Houston Museum of Natural Science, I can't devote a whole lot of time during the day, while I'm supposed to be working on my personal channel. The justification I've come to is this. When I do work on content for my channel, I will try to plug the museum's channel. And by the way, if you haven't already subscribed to the Houston Museum of Natural Science YouTube channel, I highly advise you do so. That's where I do most of my YouTube work. But I wanted to make more content for my podcast YouTube channel. So I'm trying to think of creative ways that I can put content out there, good content out there, that doesn't require hours and hours and hours and days and days and days of editing. So one of the things I've thought to do, and I mentioned this earlier in the show, is to record more podcasts and put them up on YouTube as well. But what I did earlier today is I made a few upgrades to my 1983 DeLorean. So if you're just joining me, if you're just finding this on YouTube, if you're just finding this podcast somewhere, I have a 1983 DeLorean. Her name is Lauren. I have had her since July of 2000. And over the past, how many years has that been? It's going on 22 years. I've had her for 21 years. This says July of 2021 was, the 21st anniversary of Lauren and I. And over the years, I've done tasteful upgrades. She is still, I would say, 99%, 98% stock. That's important to me to keep her as stock as possible, because classic cars are only original once, and if there are parts on it that still function and are safe, I'm going to keep those parts on it. And if I do have to replace parts, I'm going to replace them with genuine DeLorean parts or new improved DeLorean parts from DeLorean Motor Company here in Houston, technically Humble. Those of you who are not from Houston, you spell Humble, Humble. It is spelled humble, but it's just a colloquialism locally that it's Humble. That's how you can tell people from out of town. It's the same anywhere you go in the world. You know people are out of town because they can't pronounce, streets right or towns right, so you know that they're out of towners. One way that Houstonians know that someone's out of town is they can't pronounce Kirkendall and they can't pronounce Humble. Well, actually, they pronounce Humble correctly. They pronounce it Humble. Oh, are you from Humble, Texas? I was passing through Humble, Texas. Well, colloquially, it's Humble. Anyways, DeLorean Motor Company is located in Humble, Texas, and I have lived virtually down the street from them the entire time. I actually remember when I first got Lauren the DeLorean, Stephen Wynn operated a small garage off of, where was it? So if you're from Houston and you know where Micro Center is, it was around there. It was right off of Rourke Road. It was down 59. I remember it was close to where my dad used to work at WB 39 way back in the day. I think it's the CW 39. The company's changed hands many times. For those who don't know, my dad was a local anchorman here in Houston. He first started working at Channel 13, KTRK. And then he went to CW 39 or WB 39, whatever. The TV station was nearby the first DeLorean Motor Company garage. So that's how long I've had the DeLorean. That's where I brought it originally to get certain things. I would go pick up parts. And it was just, again, it was Stephen Wynn, who is now pretty much world famous. There are DeLorean Motor Company facilities all over the world now, or serving the different parts of the world. It's not like there's 60 facilities around the planet. No, they've got a couple serving, 2 or 3 or 4 serving the United States. I think there's one in Florida, California, Texas, obviously, and the Northeast, I believe. And then there's 1 or 2 in Europe. There's a couple in Europe at least, and I think that's it. Either way, I was with DeLorean Motor Company in using them and talking to them and palling around with them since Stephen was in a garage with no air conditioning. He had recently procured all the remaining parts of the defunct DeLorean Motor Company and was operating it all out of a small garage in Houston near where Micro Center is today. The bulk of inventory was in a bigger warehouse somewhere elsewhere in the United States, but he was able to consolidate it all in Humble, Texas, and that's where I get parts for the DeLorean. And that's a roundabout way of telling you what I did this afternoon. As of recording this podcast, I filmed a video that I'm currently editing, quickly editing, with some minor interior upgrades that I'm doing. I like to do a lot of things to the car myself. I recently upgraded an area of the DeLorean that desperately needs upgrading on every DeLorean, the cooling system. So I put new modern cooling fans on there that blow a lot more air through the radiator and draw a lot less current from the weak electrical system. That job took me a few days. Working on old cars is frustrating. That job was like teeth gnashing, frustrating. Anyways, what I recorded today, a few minor interior upgrades. I upgraded the shift boot with a modern, new, improved part shift boot. And I replaced the cargo net on the parcel shelf. That's hard to say fast. Parcel shelf. So those two minor upgrades. The shift boot was relatively easy. It's very easy, in fact. The parcel shelf netting was a little bit more difficult. It was more difficult than I anticipated. Basically, I had to bust out a pair of pliers and bend some hooks a little bit to get the old one off, and then put the new hooks on with the new net and take the grips or the pliers and close the loop again to over the hook. It's a thing. It was relatively easy, also frustrating, but I recorded that video, so look out for that coming to the Geek Therapy Radio YouTube channel. It's just fun to roll up my sleeves and work on her, and I think a lot of classic car guys can appreciate that. Do you want to keep talking about classic cars in the next segment? I guess we'll do it. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. We're going to talk about classic cars a little bit. We're going to discuss that realm, I guess, for a moment. But I want to point out something if you're watching this on YouTube. This arcade cabinet behind me, it has a big Konami sign on the back, or on the side here. It is a Konami arcade cabinet. I've converted it to a MAME machine. So it's a Konami cabinet, and I think the light's a little bit too dark right now to see, but it's a Street Fighter marquee on there. Here's the story behind my arcade machine. I don't know if I've told the story fully of my arcade machine on Geek Therapy Radio. If I have, it's been long enough ago that I've since accrued more listeners, and new listeners, and I will now tell the tale of how I built my arcade machine. Let's put a pin in the car talk for a moment. It's all kind of part and parcel with the same thing, because car guys and girls like to tinker with things, and us geeks also, geeks about cars and geeks about electronics, like to tinker on electronical things. And this has to do with video games too. It's the whole geek realm in one device. Other than the DeLorean, this is probably my second favorite physical thing that I own and that I've ever worked on. I'm not sure I can get it out of the house on a fire, but as far as like one of the most gratifying things I've ever worked on, this arcade machine, big time, is one of the most gratifying things. It's one of my favorite things, objects on earth. I mean, if a family member is sick or a friend needed help and somehow I needed to destroy the arcade machine, I would. Same thing with the DeLorean. I mean, it's just a material thing, but I do like them a lot. So the arcade machine, my original dream, this was back 2000, I guess, 7-ish, when did Street Fighter 4 came out? Did Street Fighter 4 come out? I think it came out in 2009, 2008 or 9. I remember 2007 it was definitely announced, because I remember crying at the news of Street Fighter 4 and speculating on the internet with a bunch of other people as to what it's going to be. And I called it back in 2007. I was like, I mark my words, Street Fighter 4 is going to be a 3D or a 2D fighter in a 3D plane, or a 3D fighter on a 2D plane. So think about games like Tekken, where you can kind of walk around in circles, and some Mortal Kombat games where you're walking around like a circular arena. I hate that. Street Fighter 2, for the most part, was Street Fighter EX circular also? Whatever. I predicted that Street Fighter 4 was going to be a 2D fighter in a 3D realm, that the camera would zoom around for like special moves and ultras and stuff like that. But as the actual fighting was going to be on a 2D plane. And that's exactly what it is. And I remember crying at the announcement of it because I love Street Fighter so much. At that time, I was depressed. I was going through depression. I don't remember any sunny days. My apartment was at a complete, just trashed pigsty. It was terrible. I had broken up with my girlfriend recently. I had moved to the Woodlands, to this apartment to be closer to her, and then she broke up with me. It sucks. I don't blame her necessarily. God bless her in her life, but it was a dark time for me. And hearing the announcement of Street Fighter 4 was a glimmer of hope. It was something, when you're depressed, it's those kind of glimmers of hope. They mean a lot, and they go a long way. Because I would spend all day and night. I had horrible insomnia. I'd be up to 7 a.m. playing Street Fighter 3, the anthology on my PlayStation 2. The 20th was it the 15th anniversary, 20th anniversary, or 25th anniversary set collection, and I was playing it on PS2. So I was just playing Street Fighter all the time, and kind of some of the only times I would leave the apartment were to go to work when I was waiting tables at the Cheesecake Factory there in the Woodlands before I quit and freelanced as an audio engineer. So I would spend every waking moment of my insomnia playing Street Fighter 2. There was a game service. What was it called? Game TV? It was before Steam. There was this service in 2007. It's the same time that the website called Super Deluxe existed. If anybody remembers Super Deluxe and Baby Cakes and Tim and Eric Night Live, that kind of era. 2007 was kind of a magical era. But anyways, some of the only times I would leave the house were to go play in Street Fighter tournaments. I wasn't the best Street Fighter player in the world by any stretch of the imagination, but it was something that brought me joy, helped me forget how depressed I was, and I would leave to go play Street Fighter 2 on occasion. The rest of the time I was just in my dank little apartment. So back to the arcade machine. From that moment when I heard Street Fighter 4 announced, fast forward a couple years, I was living in an apartment off of I-10 in Gessner, near Westheimer in Gessner. Crappy apartment. Roaches, raccoons on ceilings and spoons. F my life. I can't finish the rest of that, but me and my roommate, who's been on the show many times, Daniel SSSS, we had this chant for our motto for our apartment, and we would say it every time we do a shot. Roaches, raccoons on ceilings on spoons. F my life, it's dudded and goons. Goon being the Australian term for wine. We would just have a box of wine on the top of the refrigerator and do pulls of it and recite this chant. Anyways, in that apartment, I had Xbox 360 and Street Fighter 4, and I wanted my own Street Fighter 4 cabinet. And being in Houston, I vividly remember searching the city for any arcades. And remember, arcades aren't much of a thing anymore. There's a few one-off places keeping it alive, but especially back in 2009, 2010, there wasn't a whole lot of arcade action around Houston. And matter of fact, I vividly remember that there were only 2 Street Fighter 4 arcade machines in Houston at the time that I could find in all of my scouring, and they were imported directly from Japan. They were Japanese cabinets that were shipped to the United States, and they were here in Houston. So I said, you know what? It sure would be cool to have my own Street Fighter 4 cabinet. And that's where the idea for this arcade cabinet project came from. I said, you know what? What if I built a gaming PC inside of an arcade cabinet? So I scoured and put Steam on there, and actually this is before Steam. You had to buy the physical disc of Street Fighter 4 and install it onto Windows. I scoured Craigslist and I found somebody basically giving away an arcade cabinet, which is poppycock now, because good luck trying to find an arcade machine in any condition, a cabinet in any condition, for less than an arm and a leg, for less than a few $100s. I paid $30 for this cabinet. I had a pickup truck at a time, a 2002 Dodge Dakota, which I still miss. I put this in the back of my Dodge Dakota, brought it home. And for those of you wondering, I did not gut this machine. This cabinet was just a cabinet. There was a couple wires in there. There were no original PCBs. This was originally a game from 1988, a Konami game called Ajax, AJAX, or IAX, depending how you want to pronounce that word. It was like it was a top-bottom scrolling shooter, kind of like, well, not like Gradius, because that's a side-scrolling shooter, but 1942, those types of games. Except instead of an airplane, it was a combat helicopter. But again, none of the PCBs were in this arcade cabinet when I got it. It was just a couple wires and straps inside. It was already gutted. So I did not destroy an arcade game to put a gaming PC in it. I should do a separate video just in the arcade cabinet. So up in the marquee, I'm pointing to it here in the video, behind the Street Fighter marquee, which is I found on eBay, is the guts. It's a Core i5, a Radeon, I think 7700 series graphics card with 1 gig of DDR5 VRAM inside, and I've got Steam on it. Street Fighter 4, Ultra Street Fighter 4, Street Fighter 5, Tekken 7, Marvel vs. Capcom, all that stuff on here, as well as MAME. So it's an emulation machine also. So I've got MAME on there, of course, running Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition, Super Street Fighter 2, the new Challengers. All the Street Fighters are being emulated on here through MAME. And I've gone through different iterations of screens. Right now it is a TN panel, but I've had a couple CRTs in there, give or take, in the past, and I kind of... The thing about CRTs is I've got a couple of them. It's hard to find one in the form factor for less than an arm and a leg, because you can still buy custom arcade CRTs that will plug into modern, like HDMI and component outputs and all that kind of stuff, but they are prohibitively expensive. When I first got the machine, I had a NVIDIA GTS 250 in there, and I got that because it was the most powerful, I think it's still the most powerful NVIDIA card that had S-video output, and I went S-video into an old CRT TV monitor. CRT is still the way to go with the arcade machine, but I put a TN panel in there, a big giant widescreen, and that's its current iteration right now. That's the story of the arcade machine. Let's talk about cars coming up here. Classic cars. More Geek Therapy Radio. Don't go anywhere. And this was kind of a shorter bump, so welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Hope you're enjoying it thus far. In a previous segment, I mentioned a video I recorded that as I'm recording this podcast, as I'm recording this radio broadcast, as I'm recording this YouTube video, I've got another video in the hopper that I'm editing of some minor interior upgrades I've done to the DeLorean. And that just kind of got me on this mental tangent of classic cars and classic car ownership. And I guess what I kind of want to do right here is explain to non-car geeks the appeal of vintage and classic cars, because I think most people who are not interested in cars or not interested in classic cars would say, look at a DeLorean and be like, what a piece of crap. Look at an old 1969 Volkswagen Beetle and say, what a piece of crap. Look at an old 69 Camaro, say, what a piece of crap. Look at any classic car and be like, what a piece of crap. Why do people want that? There's no ABS, there's no airbags, sometimes there's not even any seat belts. The engines are so old and so crappy and need so much attention. They need so much upkeep. They need so much work. A lot of them, the air conditioning, if they do have air conditioning, the air conditioning doesn't work. The windows are crank windows. If there are electric windows, sometimes the electric windows. There's just a lot of work involved in owning a classic car. But what I want to convey to people who have no interest in classic cars for all those reasons and would just throw their hands up in the air and say, why would you want an old car? They're pieces of crap. Because it's not, and I think I speak for a lot of classic car owners here, we don't want, it sounds weird to say this, we don't want a perfect car that doesn't need any work. Probably 90% of the reason why we get into classic car ownership is that we do get to work with our hands and see the product of good work. That when something breaks or needs attention on a classic car, it's like, yes, I get to work on something. I get to see something that's broken, work with my hands, do something physical with my hands, and bring something that now works into reality with my hands. So me knowing that I needed to replace the radiator fans on the DeLorean, it wasn't a nightmare. It wasn't like, oh gosh, I got to replace the fans on there. It was, I can't wait to dig into that. I know it's going to be a hard project, but I can't wait to dig into that because that's 90% of why we own classic cars. Now, there are some rich yuppies, I would say, that just have more money than sense, and they don't want to get any oil under their fingernails. They just want that hot rod that they wanted in high school that they couldn't afford. So they want to get that fastback Mustang that they were never able to afford until now, but they don't want to put any work into it. They don't even know how to change the oil in the first place. Changing a brake caliper is one thing. Changing a brake drum, that's a whole nother thing. Operating a clutch, changing the master cylinder of a clutch, all of that is beyond what they want out of a classic car. They just want the experience of driving a classic car that's in perfect working order. If something happens to it, they will get out on the side of the road with a cell phone and call a tow truck, and they will keep their dress pants clean, and they don't want anything to do with actually working on the car. And to me, that's those types of people. And I'm not trying to be super critical of them. If you're money, you can spend your money however you want. But those people, mostly guys, some gals, I struggle sometimes. It's hard for me to wrap my head around how they might actually appreciate the car. Do they actually appreciate the car? Because what I'm getting at is, among that demographic of classic car owner, there's a lot of turnover. For instance, there's a lot of people, I'll use the DeLorean as an example. A lot of people my age grew up with Back to the Future, and now they're in their mid-30s, late 30s, 40s even. They really want a DeLorean because it's the car from Back to the Future. It's from their favorite childhood movie. Then they get the car, and they become so disillusioned and disenchanted. They've met their hero, and it was horrible. It's not what they thought it would be. It's a classic car. Nothing is power assisted. It's a manual transmission. The automatic is even worse. But the manual transmission, there's no power assistance. There's no is it synchronized gears? Whatever. Everything's heavy. It's like being in an old piece of gym equipment. It takes a lot of work. Being in traffic with a DeLorean, or any classic car for that matter from that era, that doesn't have power assisted clutch, so like a Lamborghini Countach or Ferrari 308. Does the 308 have power assisted clutch or hydraulic assisted? I don't think so. A lot of these classic cars, old muscle cars, they don't have power assisted clutches. They don't have power assisted brakes. They don't have power steering. So when people my age, they finally start making money, and they want, again, a DeLorean in this example because it was their favorite. It's a movie star, and they want the movie star. And then they get the movie star, and they realize this thing takes a whole lot of work. Maybe I'm not really a classic car person like I thought I was. The DeLorean isn't everything that I thought. I thought this would be easy to drive. I thought it would be XYZ. And so what happens, I think, with some DeLorean owners is they get the car, and then it's a lot of work that they didn't know that they were going to get into, or they're unwilling to perform themselves. It's hard to drive. It's not modern. There's no power steering. Like I mentioned, there's no power assisted anything. And then, so they have an uncomfortable time driving it because it wasn't what they expected. And then every time they just try to get freaking gas, they get mobbed by a crowd and have to hear Marty and McFly, hello. they got to hear the Back to the Future jokes constantly, and it's just like, this thing is hard to drive. This thing needs more work than I was willing to put into it, and I can't even go get a gallon of milk without it being a whole production. And a lot of these people, maybe they're not people. They're not a people person. And if you're going to get a car like a DeLorean that's a movie star, you have to be able to tolerate people. You have to be a people person a little bit. When I take the car out, I have to plan ahead for what I want to do with it and manage my expectations. I know I need to go get gas in the car. I need to just understand that I'm going to have to talk to one or two people at the gas station. They're going to want to take pictures, and I'm going to let them take pictures. So I need to plan on not being a jerk. Not that I'm a jerk to people, but just, you're kind of a representative at that point. An ambassador for the car, an ambassador for car culture, an ambassador for classic cars. So, if someone pulled up to the gas station in a brand new Lamborghini or brand new Ferrari, and you walked up to them, can I take a picture with your car? Can I sit in your car? I mean, F no, get out of here. Don't you dare get within 5 feet. I would imagine most owners like that are probably, and I'm not speaking for everybody, there's probably some really nice ones out there, but it's not the kind of car you get to share with other people. You don't spend $300,000 on a car and share it with other people. But I think most looky-loos kind of understand that, just kind of leave them be, say, nice car from a distance. With a DeLorean, no. They're coming up to it. They're touching it. You are not avoiding that conversation. You are not avoiding that interaction. So I'm very nice with it. And a lot of the times, most of the time, it's the first time they've ever seen that car in person. So I want to give them like the most joy, because I remember what it was like when I didn't have the car, and the rare occasion that I did see one driving around. If the owner would have said, yeah, man, come sit in this car, you can touch the steering wheel and play around with it a little bit, it would have blown my mind. So that's what I do for people who see the car, especially kids. And that's the thing about the car too, is that kids, whether they're 3 years old or they're adults 102 years old, they know the car, they love the car. So I want to keep spreading that joy. But that's all I'm going to say for that. The radio show is over now. You are worthy of love. You are worthy of giving love. You are worthy of receiving love. Thank you so much for listening to Geek Therapy Radio on the radio. Thank you for listening to the podcast and the YouTube channel. Thank you so much. See you next time. If you'd like to sponsor Geek Therapy Radio, just go to geektherapyradio.com and let's talk.